COVID-19 pandemic presents an unprecedented challenge to the world coffee sector, both on the supply side and the demand side. In understanding what the contribution of the ICO is to mitigate the impact, we have to be aware of what the ICO is and what it is not. The ICO is not a market regulator. It does not have any powers to regulate the market. However, we can make a significant impact in other ways as a knowledge-based organization. So we work on three strategic lines of action. The first is the enhancement of transparency by providing good statistics and economic analysis of the coffee sector. And in this case, we have produced three analytical papers. We call them the Coffee Break series. They are available on our website. The first one is about the impact of COVID on demand for coffee. The second is about the impact of COVID on price volatility. And the third is an impact, is a survey of exporting members to try and examine the impact of COVID on their coffee sectors. The second strategic line of action of the ICO is to be a neutral forum for discussion among both within our membership, which includes governments that represent about 99% of world coffee production and about 2/3 of world coffee consumption. So both within our membership, but also between our membership and the private sector. And here we did hold in the beginning of June in an online seminar on the impact of COVID-19 and mitigation measures. We had a lot of high-level speakers, and I would single out the chief economist of the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and the head of agribusiness of the World Bank, which leads me into the third line of action that we are responsible for, which is to mobilize and unlock technical and financial support to the world coffee sector. So here we work closely with other international organizations, especially donor organizations that have money to lend for projects, because we are not a donor agency. We are not a development agency. So we don't have any funds of our own for these types of initiatives, but we seek to attract money from other sources to help benefit the coffee sector of our member countries. In the short term, as a knowledge-based organization, we have a series of policy recommendations, which are especially applicable to the producing countries. And we call them the 3 Ps. The first P is to protect lives. And how do you do that? Is by implementing safety guidelines that protect farmers and workers all along the value chain, especially during the harvest period, which is coming up which is already underway in several countries. And the second is to support countries with lower institutional capacity in adoption of best practices. The second P is to protect livelihoods and incomes. And that is accomplished by providing short-term social safety nets to protect the incomes of vulnerable groups and to support vertically integrated value chain actors such as traders and roasters that have activities in producing countries so that they can protect the incomes of their workers also. And the third and last P is to protect the already existing investments in sustainable supply chains by facilitating recovery while fostering long-term sustainability. And this includes supporting vital links in the value chain and increasing resilience against external shocks. Another way that this can be put into effect is by governments supporting farmers in this period that we envisage that that the demand may fall, so that it's a good time for farmers to renew their plantations, to take existing and aging trees out of production and replace them with new trees. And finally, we also encourage very much to facilitate investment in mechanization and automatization, both in the harvest, but also in business transactions. So to avoid the face-to-face human contact, which coronavirus puts in jeopardy. So those are the short-term recommendations we provide to our members. And in the longer term, we are involved in an ambitious and unprecedented initiative to bring together within a task force both the public and private sectors to look at the main issues that affect the sustainability of the coffee sector and try and address them. This is a long-term project that is still in its very initial phases, but I'm very hopeful that we will see good results in the future. Yes, we see three main pathways of transmission of the COVID-19 crisis within producing countries. The first is the disruption of supply chains. That means delays in shipments because of problems with logistics in terms of transportation of coffee from the interior to ports. Within the ports, they are practicing social distancing, so it's harder to load containers. All of these disrupt the supply chain, although the governments in producing countries are very aware of this and are taking measures to minimize this disruption. The second pathway of transmission is the impact on labor supply, especially during harvest. You mentioned Colombia and Brazil. Brazil is maybe a special case because a significant percentage of the harvest in Brazil is done mechanically, so labor is not as crucial an issue as in other producing countries, but in Colombia this is certainly an issue. And like I said, the governments have been very aware of this. They have in many cases nominated coffee as a vital economic activity, so that facilitates the movement of labor around the country and helps to provide the necessary labor for harvest. And my reading of the situation is also that the impact has been mitigated to a large extent. And the third, and this is a kind of a bit of an invisible impact, is the lack of liquidity. With COVID, we have seen reduced investment in the sector, both long-term investment in terms of foreign direct investment and a reduction of public services in extension services, research and development, but also in terms of the short-term working capital of many companies in the sector. So these are the three major impacts that we see in the producing countries. Well, here we go on, we move to the other side. I just talked about the supply side. Now let's talk a bit about the demand side. And with COVID, we see first a slowdown in economic growth, which even a recession, which could lead to lower coffee consumption. We have the good fortune that demand for coffee is quite inelastic. In the coffee sector, we like to call it coffee an affordable luxury. So even when people are tight in terms of their budget, they still like to drink coffee. But of course, when it's a phenomenon of this magnitude that we are seeing, and some impact will be inevitable, but it's very hard to measure it at this early point in time. We see a tendency for consumers to downtrade, to move to cheaper brands, so maintaining their consumption, but not at the same level of prices and quality. We see a trend towards increased online sales, and I think the most important immediate impact is the effect on out-of-home consumption. Now, the statistics on how much coffee is consumed at home and out of home are challenging, let's say, to really pick up accurately. But the estimates range around about 25% of coffee is consumed out of the home, in coffee shops, but also in hospitality, in the hospitality sector, hotels, restaurants, and especially in offices. So this part of coffee consumption is likely to have been significantly impacted by COVID. To some extent, people that stay at home are likely to increase their consumption, but it is hard to believe that this will offset totally this lost consumption from out of home. So the impact is not measurable at this point, but it is a great concern. What is going to happen to demand, especially like you just said, if this crisis persists for a long time. Like I said before, we are not a market regulator, so we cannot guarantee any price levels. What we can do is work together, and this is something that the public sector by itself is unable to do, so we have to engage with the private sector. And this is the purpose of the initiative that I mentioned at the start of the interview, this coffee public-private task force that we have set up, is to try and look at these issues so that we can give farmers who are the base of the value chain the expression that people is popular right now is a living income, and this can be done through the promotion of sustainable production and sourcing, through responsible consumption by transparency on purchasing, and through appropriate governmental policies and institutions that we seek to influence. I think this was a phenomenon that was prevalent right at the beginning of the crisis, both at the consuming side and the industry side. So consumers started to stockpile essential goods like toilet paper, and I'm happy to say also coffee, which by many people's definition is an essential good. The industry also was in a very uncertain situation as to the regularity of supply. So the industry brought forward some shipments, but this phase really lasted only a short time. And in more recent months, we have seen a drop in exports. The latest month for which we have data is May of this year, and the exports in May were almost 15% lower than in May of the previous year. If we take a bit of a longer term view and look at the coffee year, which starts in October and ends in September, in the 8 months from October to May, we have seen a 5% drop in exports. So our concern is that this is already a manifestation of this drop in demand due to the economic crisis brought on by COVID. Well, in the first place, I would say that coffee is not the worst culprit in terms of environmental degradation by far. There are many other products, commodities that have a larger impact on the environment. That being said, the environmental sustainability is obviously something that is important to everybody on the planet. We need to bear in mind that the solutions are long-term in nature. They are not going to happen overnight. We also need to bear in mind that the engagement with the private sector is very necessary to move forward in this agenda. So this is a subject that is being treated in the task force that we have set up by especially by the promotion of sustainable production and sourcing, and also by looking at global funding mechanisms. 2 years ago, for example, we produced for our members a guide to access global funding from the GEF, the Global Environment Facility. So we are working hard on this, but we know this is a long-term issue. But before we end, I just like to remind our viewers that coffee growers have been going through a long period of low prices, which started before the COVID pandemic. It started in at the end of 2016. And for many of them, they are unable to cover their production costs. So when we talk about sustainability, the first thing that comes to mind in producing countries is the question of economic sustainability. I know that all three pillars of sustainability, the economic, social, and environmental, have to stand together. But without the economic sustainability, everything falls apart. So this is something that is uppermost on producing countries' minds right now. Yes, I just like to remind everybody that coffee is one of the first globalized products and has been traded extensively on world markets for more than 300 years. So we are not strangers to globalization and to the strains that globalization causes. I think these strains have been exacerbated in the last 2 decades, I think, by the growth of some structural imbalances, especially the imbalance between some highly productive producing countries, such as Brazil, Vietnam, and Colombia, and other producing countries that do not have the same level of productivity. So this is something that we need to disseminate good practices on how growers can be more efficient worldwide. And we also have to work on the demand side in terms of attacking some of these, the root causes of these imbalances, always within a free market framework. But this is another of the tasks that our task force is engaged on. Look, we at the moment, the UK is represented within the ICO by the European Union. This is only a temporary arrangement until these transition mechanisms end in December of this year. We have been in contact with the UK government, and they are taking all the necessary steps to become a full member in their own right as in January of next year. And we look forward to that, and we look forward to continuing the relationship we've had with our host government. The ICO has been based in London since 1960. So we hope to continue this relationship. With regard to the impact on coffee, this will mainly affect processed coffee, industrialized coffee, roast and ground coffee, and also the soluble coffee. And here, the impact on producing countries is reduced because they export most of their coffee in green bean form. So there the tariffs are usually set at 0, so there's no significant impact, but there could be an impact on the trade of industrialized coffee. Well, in my view, it's past time for China to be a member of the ICO. The ICO has engaged with China since the 1990s. During that time, when we still had more resources, we made promotion campaigns within China to boost coffee consumption. We still periodically are in contact with both government authorities and the private sector in China to try and bring them in. It hasn't happened so far, but we are hopeful for the future. And I would just add to your comment about China being a significant producer of Arabica, but even more than that, I think we have to look in terms of the future coffee consumption in China. With the largest population in the world, China has a very, very significant potential to become a large consumer of coffee. This will take time. The growth rates of consumption in China are very high, but they are starting from a very low level. So we look to China not only in terms of production, but much more in terms of consumption. And we hope that they will decide to join the ICO family in the near future.